Hello everybody and welcome to the RSA this evening for this very special event, Schools Without Walls. My name is Laura Partridge and I'm an Associate Director here in the RSA's education team. I'm really excited to welcome all of you this evening and to see so many friendly and familiar faces in the audience, so thank you for being here. We're live streaming tonight, so welcome to everyone joining online, which I know includes some of the schools that are featured in the report, so special welcome to you. If anyone would like to join the conversation on Twitter, we're using the hashtag RSA Schools. So if you follow that hashtag, you'll be able to see what everyone else has said and join in. We're really grateful to have had the support of our partner, ECIS, which is the Educational Collaborative for International Schools, to do this piece of work. And with their support, my colleague Naomi and I set off on a bit of a tour of the UK, the US, Italy and Israel, visiting schools where community engagement and partnerships with the world beyond the school gates were core to what the school thought they needed to do in order to achieve their mission. And we saw that these relationships were not only contributing to students' academic and personal development, but also they were making a real difference to the communities immediately around the school and to trying to tackle some of the broader societal issues. Tonight we're really delighted to be joined by a distinguished panel representing educators, school partners and local leaders. And we're going to be exploring what it really takes to build and sustain such relationships, and actually chatting in the green room before we've realised that sustainability actually is maybe one of the key questions that we want to explore. How do we make these partnerships last? We also want to be asking how more schools can become schools without walls, acknowledging that it shouldn't only be schools with the most brilliant leaders and the staff that work all hours to make that happen, that get to work in that way, and that we need some structural support in place so that every school can work like that. And we know that if we do, we'll be able to tackle issues such as social exclusion and poverty. So each of our speakers joining me on the panel this evening has a connection to schools that are featured in the report, which hopefully you'll have been able to pick a copy up of just outside. And it's brilliant to be able to have their insights tonight. So joining us, we have in the middle, Suany Ramos, who is principal of the Island School, a vibrant learning community for children and parents on Manhattan's Lower East Side. Serving families struggling with poverty, homelessness, domestic violence and immigration issues, the Island School is one of 47 New York schools that are designated showcase schools. With support from a powerful network of civic and business partners, the school offers wraparound services, including after-school and vacation programs, on-site medical services and adult education. The school received the Coalition for Community Schools 2017 National Award of Excellence, and in recognition of her inspirational leadership, Principal Ramos serves on the task force of the Chancellor of New York City Schools and as a trainer mentor for school principals across New York City. I was very lucky to have the opportunity to visit her school last year, and I found what they were doing really inspirational, and her leadership and her team's work really inspirational too, so it's really exciting to be able to hear from her this evening. We also have Dave Bradley. Dave is a programs manager at Save the Children, where he's responsible for the project management of a really exciting new initiative, the Feltham Early Learning Community, which is run out of Reach Academy as part of the Reach Children's Hub, and he'll be able to explain a little bit more about what that means. But in brief, it's an early years initiative focused on improving early learning outcomes for children living in poverty through a systems approach. In his previous role at the charity Dave was managing the UK outreach team, and that was all about scaling up social action at schools across the United Kingdom. And social action is one of the key themes in our report, so that's something that we might return to later in the evening. Last but not least, Damien Allen is Doncaster Council's Statutory Chief Officer for Children and Adults. A qualified teacher, Damien's been a senior manager in education and a governor in every phase of education before moving into local authorities. He was initially in school improvement, and then he was working with wider children's services. As a director in local government, Damien's had a wide range of experience across children and adult services, commissioning, libraries, community services. I don't know how he's fitted all of this in. And mental health and community services. In addition, he's advised the UK and other governments on education, children's services, and acting as a member of a number of commissions of inquiry and ministerial advisory groups. And we actually have a school represented in our reports that's in Doncaster, XP School, which I know that Damien's going to talk a little bit about this evening. So I think you'll all agree we've got a powerful range of insights and expertise across the panel to draw on for this evening's conversation. And I'm really looking forward to hearing each of them. And then we're going to have an opportunity for you to ask any questions that you have. So please be thinking as our speakers are talking, if there's anything that you'd really like to follow up on or know more about, hold those questions and you'll have your opportunity to ask those. We're going to kick off with Principal Ramos, if we may. We'd really like to first of all welcome you to London and thank you for making the trip across the pond to be with us this evening. We're really fortunate to have you here. As I said, I learned so much from my visit to your school, and it would be great to hear from you a little bit about what the Island School shows about how partnerships with the community can really support schools to achieve what they want to achieve.
Well, thank you. This is much harder than being a school principal, believe me. So good evening. My name is Suany Ramos, and I've been the principal for PSMS 188 in the Lower East of Manhattan for 7 years. We are a pre-K to 8 school, and 5 years ago, we had only 237 students. Something changed when we decided to write a grant that was for community school. I think that serving pre-K to 8, and we service 480 to about 520 students. The reason why I say 580 to about 520 is because we live across the street from the shelter. 50% of our babies are from the shelter across the street, domestic violence. 34% to 37% are English language learners, and 41 to 49% are students with disabilities. Thinking of this hub of what we have and what we have been doing, the school was a school in not good standing. So we decided to write the grant of a community school. What does that mean? That means that as a community school, we are providing every single service you believe that a family needs. We're opening from 6:30 in the morning to 7 o'clock at night, Monday through Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays. For the summer, we only close for 2 weeks, the last 2 weeks in August. Every single break, Christmas, winter break, we are there. We think of providing everything we can because of our students. What does that mean? Our attendance has improved because we are providing everything you could think of, from enrichment to regular curriculum to support. So we go home to the shelter, pick up the children. We have parent services. Along with all of that, we have become, in the past 5 years, our school is a school in good standing. What does that mean? Schools in New York City are rated based on a letter A grade. That means that every child in your class, in your school, 3rd grade through 8th grade, which are testing grades, should do a 1 year to a year and a half progress. Every single child for the past 5 years have exceeded progress. What does that mean? That means that every single child that comes into 188, we are touching their lives. I think that the issue we're having is that besides the academic, every principal worries about the academic support. I don't worry about the academic support as a second opportunity. My first opportunity has to be to make sure that our children, our families, not just the children, the uncle, the aunt, whoever it is that this child is living with, we are providing every single services they need. What does that mean for us? We have a partnership with Jewish Board, which is a mental health provider. They are there, housed in the building Monday through Friday from 8 o'clock in the morning to about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We have a clinic, which is the Ryan Nina Clinic, and we provide immunizations, everything you could think of in the building, free of charge for the parents. So what's happening is, instead of a child saying, well, I'm going to be out today, I won't bring my child to the school because they need to get the immunizations, that's provided at the school. We have a partnership with New York Cares, which is one of the CBOs in New York City that provides volunteer work, where we have about 80 volunteers providing academic support to individual students twice a week for 45 minutes. We have what we think of a washer and dryer for our family. So in the school building, Monday through Friday, there is 2 hours designated in the morning and 2 hours designated in the afternoon for the families to come and do their laundry free of charge. We're not charging for anything that we're supporting there. We provide parenting skills for every single parent, for every single one that walks in the building. I think that what has been special with 188 and supporting us is the partnership that we build. When anyone comes into 188, we're telling them, this is a family, this is a community. If you're not invested from the heart, you cannot be part of 188. And I tell them, once you join 188, you come in and visit, you will not want to leave without saying, anything positive will coming back. Why? Because when you see the children that we get from the shelter across the street, they're coming in with no education. They're coming in, not because they want to, but remember, they lost everything, whether it's their mom, whether it's their permanent home, whether it's their father. Remember, it's a domestic violence, right? So it's abused. So whether they're abused by their parent, whether they're abused by their mom. So whomever it is, all of that we take in consideration in 188. I think that the biggest picture of this is when Laura went in is, I know every single child by name and every single parent by name. That makes a difference. Why? Because when you come in the morning, you want to concentrate and say, hey, hi, Johnny, how are you? How was your day? I think that also something that's very special and unique about 188 is that every single staff member, maybe 95%, were there for 12 to 13 hours a week. The same teachers, the same partners, because again, all of our partners, they are housed in the school building. It's difficult because to go around, and we have about 12 partners, and we meet once a month, and then I have cohorts that meet twice a week in supporting. What do we do? Besides supporting the services that we give to the children, it's looking for grants. How do you look for grants? In New York City, I think we're lucky because for us, the chancellor sends out what we call Principals Weekly. In Principals Weekly, at the bottom of the 100 page, there is something called a link to grants. It's time-consuming for leaders. It's definitely something else that you have to do. It's another hat you have to wear. But what I do is I go through those grants, and I don't only aim for the $500,000, for the little small grants of $25,000, $10,000, $5,000. That doesn't seem much, but when you take the 5, the 10, and the 25, and you add it to your budget, definitely you can make a difference. One of the commitment I have in my building is any partnership that comes in, you need to commit to be there for 2 or 3 years and to partner a family. That means that you're coming in, yes, we're going to do this service, and even if I have to pay a small fee, we do. But that contract has to say that you're going to sponsor one family after you leave my partnership. So if you are in 188 for 3 years and you decide to leave, that means that it could be Johnny, it could be Paul, it doesn't matter who it is, you are going to be in contact with this family for another year and supporting them. Remember, the way I look at things is, I'm not going to change everybody's life, but by the time my students leave there, whether it's in kindergarten, whether it's in pre-K, whether it's in 8th grade, I have changed someone's life. And let me tell you, is it difficult? Yes. And sometimes it's hard because in the morning coming in, we have children with a lot of meltdowns. Remember, they come from the shelter. They don't have the support. So it's dealing with the social, emotional piece first, and then to that academic. So for us, it's really hard to come and see children in the morning where they have not had breakfast or they have not had lunch. So what do? We provide 3 meals a day. So we have a small hot breakfast in the morning. It could be from 7 to about 8:30 or 9 o'clock. We also have lunch for them between 12 and 2:30. And then before they go home at 7 o'clock, we do hot supper from 5:30 to 7 o'clock. Is this possible with the school budget? No. So that's where it comes in, of those partnerships, committing them to your school building. As a leader, like I said before, it's extremely hard and difficult for you to commit to so many things. But if you do it with your heart and you ask those partners to come in and support you, you can sustain them in your building. And again, not only looking for those expensive, high grants of what the city is going to give you, because I think everybody knows that New York City, with the budgets, it's not enough. It's not enough. They only give you enough for the ELA, for the math. You don't have for the extracurriculum activities. So for me, during the morning from 6:45 to about 7:30, I provide enrichment, homework help. We do family workshop for parents. It's parenting skills, but definitely we do a lot more than that. We just don't want it put out there something that parents sometimes don't know how to speak to their children. So we're talking about everything you could think of with our parents. We provide English language, parents with English classes. We provide everything you could think of, like I said, even for the families. We do have a vision and screening at the school, which means that every single child that needs eyeglasses, they come in, they do the exam, and they get it for free. They don't pay a penny. They don't have to take it out of their insurance. We have a dental clinic that comes into the building. They are there housed every Wednesday for free. They do filling. Everything you could think of, we are providing at 188. And let me tell you, at the beginning when I started 7 years ago, people were saying, Ms. Ramos, you're going to burn out. You can't continue to do 12 hours a day. And let me tell you, my husband keeps saying, you have 10 more years. You got to go. And I keep telling him I will. But I think that unless I find the right person that's going to continue to push the babies, the families that we have on 188? I don't know if I'm sure. Why? Because we have seen the difference. We have students that have graduated and come back and say, why don't you create a high school? Why? Because they keep saying, after we leave 188, we don't have the connection. We don't have the partnership. We don't have someone that knows us by name. We have someone that doesn't understand. So is it a commitment? Yes. Is it hard to do? Definitely. But I think that with the right partnership, the right families, because everyone that comes in, we tell them, this is a family. If you cannot be part of the family, you cannot be part of 188. Later on, when questions, if you have any particular questions. But I would say to you that in fighting for those partnerships, for those extra families that can donate to schools, $1,000, $500, as a school leader, you must take it and welcome the family to say, what else can you do for me? Like I said, I have over 120 volunteers that come, that commit their time to the school to speak to a child, to do homework with a child. Someone comes in and does yoga for them. Someone comes in and does singing lessons for them. So it's those partnerships, yes. Are they expensive? Yes, but you have families that love to donate their time. We have families that love to donate extra fundings if they have, even if it's not a lot. But just to have someone to pair up with your school to one of your families would definitely make a difference. And you start with one, and that person is going to bring you another one, and then we continue from there. But start looking for those small partners that you feel that don't have a lot to offer, but depending on the conversation and the commitment that you ask for them to have in your school, it might make a difference. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Suany. And I think it's notable that when we first set out on this research and we were thinking about the types of partnerships that schools might build, families didn't come to mind immediately. And then it was as we started to discover schools like the Island School, Surrey Square, and we've got a representative from that school here tonight, and Reach Academy, which I know Dave's going to speak to, we started to realise that actually families are really important partners to schools, and that brought a new dimension to our thinking. So thank you to all of you for making us think about that. Moving on to Dave, I know we've already spoken about a little bit about the vital role that charities and volunteers and other supporters can play in supporting schools to achieve their missions. Can you talk to us a little bit about the work that Save's doing with Reach Academy?
Sure, of course. That was amazing. Just to start, I've made so many notes I'm going to steal. But yeah, good evening, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here. It'll be great to talk about Reach and the work of Save the Children. And if I have time and I'm not being waved at, it'll be great to pick up about what charities can actually do in order to support schools effectively, which hopefully we'll get onto later. So just to set the scene, Reach Academy is a small all-through free school that's based in West Hounslow. Some of you may know it for Felton Young Offenders, but there's a great deal of need in the area. It actually sits in a position where it really experiences a great barrier to services, where individuals can't have to get buses for 45 minutes in order to access key services that they may need. And also it has a very low percentage of 18-year-olds who go on to higher education. So the school and its three founders really thought that Feltham had a large amount of need all the way through from 2 to 18. And one of the things that the founders were very, very keen about at the beginning was that parents were going to be central to what they did. The relationships between the school, the parents, and the children who were attending the school are the first thing that they talk about when you walk in there. Every parent is greeted with a smile, and everyone is welcomed. And everyone has the phone number of the teacher and of the executive head, who's Ed Vanker. I'm sure you can imagine if there's any educators in the room, it's quite a big ask in order to do that to your staff. But there's a real investment in the staff that are there and also the provision for the families. The school are very keen to go the extra mile, and they will do anything for those families that are in the school. If any of you have time after this, I'd really encourage you to Google H is for Harry, which is an amazing film about the school that's just come out. So where does Save the Children sit in this? For you though who may not know, I certainly didn't. Save the Children's been working in the UK for a long time now, and is particularly interested in early years education. Our goal is to lower the attainment gap between children in poverty and their better off peers. And as I'm sure everyone is acutely aware, poverty and dealing with this is such a complex issue. It requires involvement on numerous different levels and numerous different partnerships. and it requires those partnerships to make significant impacts. So what Save the Children has started to do is an early learning community project. What this is a local partnership in Felton with Reach Academy that is looking at a systems approach to early years. So how can we get a local system, very small, across 2 wards, working significantly for the children in poverty that live there? We've been meeting with PVIs, schools, voluntary providers, and the local authority, and trying to build up a picture of what does the system look like locally. And I think this is something that's really important, and a big alignment between Save the Children and Reach is that we want the community to be involved. We recognise that there are key stakeholders, not just within the professional sphere, but actually there are community organisations and large community voices who really care about the local community, really care about what happens in Felton. And for anything that we're going to do, it is significant and important that their voices are heard. So we've done our best over the last few months to really get out there and talk to people, try and understand what's going on, and really bring that voice of the local stakeholder to the forefront. If you read the report and go into it, you'll see that when Reach Academy were looking at their vision, they realised that a school wasn't going to do enough in order to really support the families that were in their area, much like we've just heard. So their vision was to create a cradle-to-career hub, which provided wraparound services for 0 to 21, which is where this extra work has come in, and with family support, working with the wider community, and where our partnership sits really nicely. Some of the pieces of work that we've done to try and engage more widely with the local community are we've set up an early years network, where we've been able to bring local practitioners together to talk about the issues they're experiencing, to provide free training. And what was really important for us was that we provided training in CPD that was wanted. The council in Hounslow does an excellent job at providing some of the training, but we were hearing from practitioners that they wanted specific training on SEND and also other aspects of early years. So we provided that and brought them together. And something else we've been doing is delivering programs around parental engagement, trying to empower parents to engage with their children's learning at home. Kind of the soft way of saying parenting courses, but they're really effective and have been really grabbed hold of by some of our local settings. What we're doing at the minute is we're really looking to plan sustainably for the next 3 years, to go back to that key word of the night probably. So how can we work in Feltham across over a 3-year period and beyond? How we're going to do this is we're kind of setting up a series of collaborative workshops where we bring together a wide variety of the stakeholders I've mentioned, whether that be members of the council, of local educational settings, volunteers, and really crucially parent and child voices as well, in order to create that local plan. We really want it to reflect what people think about Feltham, what they perceive as the issues, and we want them to have the ownership of it. What's really supporting us to do this from the Save the Children's side that we've been able to provide is what we've called an early learning toolkit, which is a real step-by-step process to come up with this plan that's rooted in the evidence, what matters for child outcomes and really what works. And being able to base ourselves in those principles, I think has given a lot of credibility to be able to say, we know that reducing parental stress is going to really help a child's outcome, but how do we put that into practice? So we're on this process now in order to create what is going to be a vision for Feltham. I think what's actually allowing us to do this is the quality of the relationship that Save the Children has with Reach Academy Feltham and where charities can play that role. I think just to touch on a few really crucial things, what we've been able to do is add capacity. We've been able to employ a small team. There's 3 full-time staff working on it, including myself. And just that in itself is an introduction of a lot of people power into the local area to be able to have those conversations and to be able to intervene in the right areas. What I think we've been able to really accomplish as well and want to work on more is having a strong governance system between the school and also Save the Children. But what we want to do further is to have a local steering group. We want those local voices to not just be part of the planning process, but to really drive forward the work, to be a sounding board for what is right, and so that we can always be sense-checking what we're doing. That continuous involvement and those continuous partnerships are really key. I think in terms of the staff that we've employed, I think it's a real mixture of experience within education, but actually looking locally. One of the ladies called Jenny, who's amazing, used to be a manager at one of the local children's centres, and just having her knowledge and expertise and her phone book, to be honest, has opened up doors that I don't think we could have done in any other way. And I think one thing we've worked on continuously over the last 9 months is spending time as a partnership between Save and Reach to really dig down deep into the aligning of our values and understanding where each other sits and trying to understand what we're trying to achieve. Because I think only through doing that are you going to have that consistency and accountability to each other, and knowing that you're working on something that is really going to have the impacts that you're both trying to work on. I think that's been really crucial and has been great for me personally to be embedded in the local team there. Being at a big organisation like Save and a very small school is two very different environments, and being able to speak both languages is really important. Institutional languages within organisations can be such a barrier, but being able to break down systems and processes that make it accessible for our partners has been really key. If I have time, I want to touch on this. Do I?
Yeah, you've got
Great.
time. Getting the nod.
Cool. So I think, as Laura mentioned, I've worked previously on other partnerships with schools, and I really wanted to touch on what I think charities can do. And I feel like, and the evidence shows that charities are beginning to fill the void of the landscape that I'm sure we'll talk about more of the political void and the money void soon. But a recent report from the Charity Landscape report noted that 83% of charity leaders were seeing an increase in the last year of need of their services. I think that just shows the scale to which charities are coming to work more within the sectors within education, but also in social services. And I think to take a step forward and the kind of things we're talking about in schools, it isn't just about providing opportunities in terms of the missing services, but actually being able to provide and enable a wider and more diverse curriculum, but also give experiences for students as well that they may not be able to have. Being in Feltham, you're in the very end of London, but what experience can charities bring in order to engage young people outside of their comfort zone and also to increase that learning as well? And I think something I'd like to finish on is that I think for charities, it has to be incumbent on them to target where the need is greatest. And I feel that a kind of meritocratic approach where children who may be living in poverty who are achieving the best in school sometimes gets a lot of focus, but actually it's about raising the attainment and the aspirations amongst the entire population of those children that we're focusing on. And I think that's a really key point as we're in such a fragmented and marketized education system that those winners and losers that are created, charities are in a unique position to level that playing field, and I think it's super important. So yeah,
Thanks very much.
welcome.
So you've mentioned it, and I guess it came across in what Suany was saying as well about people under pressure, staff working all hours, charities struggling to meet the increased need that they're facing, and we've been speaking before coming in tonight about the pressures facing local authorities as well. And I'm wondering, Damien, in that context, what kind of political support do you think we need to make these kind of initiatives where communities and schools partner really closely thrive and make them successful in every place where schools want to do this kind of work?
Is that a direct question?
It is, yeah.
I think, we're in a bit of a threshold, really, in terms of governance generally. That might be an understatement nationally. But the ascendancy of local governance, I think, is having a resurgence. And some of it is that vacuum that was mentioned earlier, because quite simply we understand the people and the place because we're deeply engaged and we have a connection with that place and it matters. And I think, whether it's geographical or social or familial distance, the closer you are to the sort of purpose that you're trying to achieve, the more compelling it is to get engagement and commitment. And that is throughout the whole of the community. So it's really interesting listening to colleagues because the key thing for me is connecting into that passion You know, that sort of ability to want to make a difference certainly is what drove me into public service, and I think many other people. And that isn't to deride the significance of other sectors. And I think the other thing is that we're having to adapt to circumstances. And really David's point about working with the local authority, Suany's point about working with partnerships, we can't do it alone. We were talking in the green room, and I might have dated myself by suggesting that the more funky the partnerships, the better. And some of it is also about conflating people with the prior expectations around what a local authority is, what a council is, and what it does. Because whilst we still retain that local democratic sort of mandate and accountability, it doesn't mean that we aren't keeping up with the times either.
Absolutely. And of course, we were talking about the ways in which Doncaster has been adaptive and the funky partnerships that you have created. So it'd be great to hear more about the different approach that you're taking in Doncaster.
Thank you. Good evening, colleagues. And I just want to start by saying in Doncaster, with our rich heritage, and I would say this, warm, welcoming Yorkshire culture, it's highly evident to any visitor that our place has a substantial amount to offer to the learning experiences of children and young people. The comic Paul Tonkinson recently proclaimed that people in Yorkshire are proud of their underachievement. In Doncaster, since we seized the strategic moment in 2016, I strongly believe that every day we're proving that this is not the case insofar as it ever was. We've had so much, I think, to be proud of in our borough, and our people stand at the centre of this. Young people live, learn, and often eventually work within their local communities. And I believe that all action should be socially situated and socially embedded. We all have a sense of belonging, a sense of identity, and a sense of origin associated with our place. Our communities, therefore, have so much to offer, both through their assets and their contribution to developing the learning experience, and to growing and sustaining the inclusive economy of tomorrow. Doncaster's learning provision faces a number of entrenched challenges, be it deindustrialisation, high levels of socioeconomic disadvantage, and low levels of social mobility. All of this has generated communities that are disconnected from both learning and economic growth. And as a consequence of this, we've inherited a learning system with low expectations, where inherent attainment levels are significantly below national average. But I've always believed that government policy never mandated what matters. By that I mean national government policy. And in many cases, it often makes it worse. Academisation reforms created schools which were institutionally distinct from their local communities and fractured the local collaborative infrastructure and damaged the concept of the community school and extended schools movement that we saw in the early noughties. And within this context, we needed to create a distinctly Doncaster approach to learning and skills, which would resonate within the place and engage our local communities for the benefit of all learners. And as a local authority, I felt that our role was to act as the convener of change with strong system leadership to enable this. But first we had to disrupt the inertia within the system. And the role of credible outside challenge was vital to this. So we convened an independent commission for education and skills in 2016 to assess the state of learning in the borough and to make recommendations for change. The panel of national experts was led by Professor Sir Tim Brighouse and Dr. Anne Lim, and they offered visible and appropriate levels of challenge to our system, drawing upon engagement from stakeholders across the sector. And the resulting One Doncaster report, with its 30 recommendations for change, confirmed that we had to reach beyond the traditional institutional boundaries and re-engage with Doncaster as a place to produce improvements in learning. And this was our disruptive moment, and it allowed us to coalesce the system together around three key agendas: our social opportunity area, our education inclusion programme, and our cultural education partnership. And our success as a broker of relationships within the system allowed us to secure substantial funding from the government's OA programme and to bend it into local shape so that many of our core objectives arising from the Commission about improving learning were able to be incorporated into the scheme. But it's critical, as mentioned earlier, to secure political support. And we're very fortunate in Doncaster in having Mayor Ros Jones, who's in her second term. And she's placed learning and skills at the centre of her 4-year plan for the borough, Doncaster Growing Together. And the strategy is focused on going local, utilising community forums and assets to transform and deliver services in localities. And this has been underpinned by a political commitment to a Team Doncaster partnership approach, including partners from across the public, private and voluntary sector, together to place education and skills firmly on the agenda. However, when the Education and Skills Commission returned in 2018, one area of challenge they posed to us was broadening the participation within communities. And our aim, therefore, over the course of the next 2 years is to expand the range of individuals and organisations involved with the provision of learning in Doncaster's localities. And this is why we've worked hard as a system leader to broker new and ambitious relationships between these groups within our local education ecosystem. And in so doing, we're looking to develop a local education offer which embraces the significant role that the community can play in offering a socially situated form of learning to our children and young people. We've underpinned this by supporting the development of effective middle-tier organisations, organisations between local government and the service user. A good example of that is our business education organisation, Opportunities Doncaster, but also by investing in research and development and ensuring that the best practice in learning becomes a common practice in our classrooms. And another good example of one of those middle-tier organisations is Partners in Learning, built out of 2 teaching schools. And what they've done is to facilitate an evidence-based teacher practice improvement process within our schools. And another example of innovation that we've brought to try and disrupt is that we're the first location in the UK to implement big picture learning, an innovative model of education which seeks to engage those disengaged with mainstream learning, often through placements and interactions within the local community as part of their advisory setting. These developments are just a few examples of how we are creating a new infrastructure for community school interaction and developing a local system which stands above the polarisation between institutional schooling and the community. We also recognise that our communities face isolation. Doncaster's centres of population are distributed across the borough, as we encompass a number of market towns, a substantial number of villages, and the large central town of Doncaster itself. And this is why we're investing in a number of networks to bring our communities together, including a bid to the RSA to enhance our network of lifelong learning provision delivered through community assets to become a pilot city of learning area. We'll look to use new technologies to underpin this, and we're already in the process of delivering a new all-age careers information advice and guidance system for the borough. And we hope to support this with a digital platform to support business-accredited micro-courses that can be accessed within the locality. We're also working to develop a business-led higher education offer, which is based on the sharing of resources between communities and building upon pre-existing centres of learning and excellence, so that we can develop a form of learning that is inclusive, accessible, and vocationally relevant. And this investment in local learning infrastructure will help ensure that no community is left behind in our drive to raise both standards and also to increase the number of local residents attaining qualifications. But there are a number of major challenges, and in my view, community schooling is no longer an option, but a necessity in meeting some of these fundamental challenges in Doncaster. Inclusion, or often referred to by the trade press as exclusion, and I think there is a significant difference. It's really helpful to focus on language, I think, that we were talking about before. The fragmentation of the secondary sector and the continued focus nationally on high accountability stakes through league tables, narrow attainment targets, externally regulated inspections has led to poor inclusion practice. And this is evidenced by high levels of both fixed and permanent exclusions, and topically flagged nationally this week with the publication of the long overdue Timpson Review. And we're emphasising that all Doncaster's young people should be able to access appropriate education to their needs. And we're reinforcing this through a series of inclusion summits, encouraging schools to sign up to an inclusion charter and act collaboratively with each other and the local community to reduce the incidence of school exclusion. I've mentioned social mobility already, but we're brokering a strong local business education relationship with high-quality careers information, advice and guidance, and demonstrates, or should demonstrate, that all young people can do it in Doncaster to fulfil their ambitions. And links with business means that schools can access more meaningful experiences of work and offer relevant vocational qualifications which meet the borough's future skill requirement in a local economy which is the 4th fastest growing in the country. And the work of the Local Careers Hub and Opportunities Doncaster, helped by the Opportunity Area, have produced a business school community dynamic that is strengthening every day and creating progression pathways which support social mobility, and in particular with a focus on the development of essential life skills so that we can better evidence broader achievement. And 2 other areas that we're focusing on in wider children, family and community services is that we're pulling together integrated area-based working where we wrap multi-agency working around schools as the focus within areas so that we can support the wider needs of children and families by taking a whole family working approach. We've also been working with Cormac Russell to look at an asset-based community development. I love that, ABCD. It's got a pretty important sort of ring when we come to education. It's a bottom-up, done by the community, strengths-based approach, and it focuses on what's strong, not what's wrong. And the result of this combination of developing the learning infrastructure, investing in evidence-led practice across the sector, and a commitment to whole person, whole life approach to learning has led to support the development and expansion of experiential and human-scale education learning in Doncaster. HSE is an education reform movement committed to small-scale learning communities based on the values of democracy, justice and respect. It works directly with schools, parents and communities to promote human-scale learning environments where children, young people are known and valued as individuals. We've promoted this through supporting Doncaster XP schools. It's situated on an industrial estate outside of Doncaster town centre. It draws students from across the borough through its lottery-based admissions system. And the school is deliberately small, admitting 250 students in Key Stage 3 and 4, with an option for them to continue their studies into the 6th form. And as the Schools Without Walls report illustrates, XP conceptualises itself as a school with the community, developing learning expeditions within the local area. And they've built strong relationships with local community assets and the Heritage Service, which I'm proud to lead. As a consequence, much of XP's success as an outstanding institution, judged by Ofsted, means that it's oversubscribed. This year, it had applications that would double the number of places that it had to offer. And that is, I believe, due to its interaction with the local community and extending its provision beyond the formal education boundaries and traditionally avoiding purely prescribed national curriculum routes. And I know Gwynna Parry and Andy Sprakes would have loved to have been here today to profile their work, but they're busy hosting a visit from Lego from Denmark. They have, however, asked me to invite all of you to their annual expose conference on the 20th of June. So if you're watching, Gwyn, I've followed through. So colleagues, in conclusion, what has been fundamental to our progress and adopting our place-shaping role, I believe, is the benefit of long-term secured political support. With a policy commitment to community learning and development and a local education ecosystem which both supports innovation and the development of community-orientated forms of learning like XP. We now look forward to developing Doncaster as a city of learning where our community assets are fully utilised to generate a form of whole-person, whole-life learning which can support the development of a high-achieving education system. Thank you.
Thanks, Damien. You've covered so much ground there that I barely know where to start. But there's one thing that's been on my mind throughout, which is that obviously we've got representatives from the UK and the US here tonight, and I'm struck that there's a very particular political environment that we're working in here. And Suany, speaking to you earlier, I know you've spoken about the importance of the political support that you've had from New York City. And I wondered if you could tell the audience a little bit about the form of the support that you've had, but also the questions that you have about the longevity of that support and how you can continue to be enabled to do the work that you're doing.
Political support. I think it's difficult. I'll tell you why. New York City, if you are a school in good standing, or if you are an aid school, you start with all these services, but then as soon as you become a great school in good standing, you lose all the funding. So what happens with that? The budget is not enough. So what do? You make connections with, I wrote this down, the council member, which is within your district. It's something that every year the council member have X amount of funding to provide for schools. What do? I do a partnership with the parents. We take a walk and we go to the council member. The congresswoman, our council member. I think also one of the biggest things in New York City is going to the chancellor's office and having those conversations of what a school needs and what the population is. Based on our population, like I said, having 50% of students from the shelter across the street doesn't allow us to have what every other school has in the sense of the curriculum. One of the things I was saying this morning was every time we change the mayor or the chancellor, the curriculum change. It doesn't allow you to continue to focus the teacher and to better your practice, to definitely educate the students. I think also what's happening is the education system is not as important as it used to be before. So for us is how do I commit? So it's taking those CBOs that I have, many of them, like I said, I have about 15 to 20 partnerships that I continue to have for over 10 years. It's committing them to going to Albany, to going to Washington, and continuing to ask for those funding. Just because, yes, we are a school now in good standing, we didn't do it alone. We can't do it alone. We became a school in good standing. It's because of all the extra services that we were able to provide for that population of students. I think that if every child in New York City or around the world were academically on a level 3, we wouldn't need all the extra support. But unluckily right now, not having the funding to educate the students the way we need to continue to ask our politicians and sit in those panels and write those affidavits and ask those letters of support where we need to do all the time. I think that for us, again, the way I was presenting it before, a school that has the demographics as 188 is the expectations it will be that it will be a school in failing. It will be a school that's failing, that is not succeeding at all. And unluckily for them, but luckily enough for us, we have had the support of, like I said, the council member, the congresswoman, and a lot of CBOs. We have a lot of partnership with banks. JP Morgan, I was telling you before. So taking Citibanks, all of those banks, every single partnership that I have, I value, and I continue to cherish and push them to support me in getting those little funding. Like I said before, we have committed the council member for about 10 years in providing $25,000 to $50,000 towards the extra curriculum activities that we cannot afford for us during our budget. And I think the big piece is bringing the parents, having those parents workshop that we monthly have those parents workshop. For me, it's difficult because I have students traveling for about 3 hours away because of the shelter. When they get moved from the shelter to another temporary home, they are provided in buses. So if school starts at 7:30, they are getting up at 5 in the morning to travel to 188. And they do. We have about 45 families that travel from 3 hours away. Why? Because we are providing what they feel it's what they need as a family and as a home. So it's just that continued commitment of asking. It's funny, but they call me the beggar principal no matter where I go. I'm always asking for my school because if I don't do it, I am not going to have enough for my family. And the way we've made it to where we are, and like I said, 5 years ago, we were 220. To be at 500, it's an increase of about 340 students, has to do with the work that we're doing. And again, I couldn't do it alone. It's the families, the partnership, and from the support from the city.
It'd be wonderful to think if we could have less principals going out begging and more conveners of change, as Damien spoke about, people supporting you to bring all those partners together, which I guess is essentially the work that SAVE are doing. I'm aware that you have been listening for a long time, and there are probably people in the audience who have lots of questions to ask our panel. And so I'm going to hand over to you. I'd ask you, if you have a question, to raise your hand and wait for one of my colleagues to bring you a mic before you speak. If you could just please say who you are and try and keep your question fairly succinct so that we can get through as many as possible, that would be brilliant. I noticed straight away one hand at the back here and another in the centre. We'll take those two and then we'll come back for another round.
First of all, thank you very much for the inspirational stories that you've shared tonight. A particular research area of mine is looking at philanthropy in primary education. And I think one of the big challenges that we have to face now is you're all talking about relying much more on philanthropic funding. However, we know that's not distributed evenly. So, for example, research we've done shows that a primary school can bring in, if it's in an area of deprivation, about 12 pence per child per year, versus a primary school in a wealthy area that brings in around £600 per child per year of additional income. And I think a big challenge we need to consider here tonight is how do we distribute that philanthropic support more evenly?
Thank you very much. We'll take the second question, then we'll come back to the panel. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Leah. I'm a governor at a primary school in southwest London, and we're just looking at improving our parental engagement and community engagement. My question is for Suany. Really, how did you get buy-in from your staff to do those long hours, and do they burn out quickly? Do you have a high staff turnover? And secondly, when you're contacting banks and other organisations and things like that, how does that journey start? Is it a phone call or a letter or?
Lovely. Do you want to kick off with that, Suany?
Sure. Oh boy. So I think that the first thing at my building is I wouldn't ask my staff to do something I wouldn't do. So what does that mean? It's if I'm asking them to do the 12 hours a day, I'm there from 6:15 in the building to about 7 o'clock at night. So the commitment comes from me first. And then I started with a small cohort at about 5 or 6 of us. And that's why I said to you, you start with one and then you continue to do. So at this point, like I said, 95, everyone is committed because I'm there. And they tend to build this relationship with the children and the family that they feel committed to. They see the benefit of it. At the beginning, when you start as a teacher, you're like, oh, I'm done at 3 o'clock. But once you see that your relationship builds differently with your students and your capability of getting them to where you want them to be changes as you commit a little more, it continues to that. I think for me, it's a little easier because I do a lot of support. What does that mean? I'll give you an example. We have parent-teacher conferences, which is the time for the teachers to meet with the parents after school. We end at 9 o'clock. Usually the next day, what I do is I take, being pre-K to 8, I take, let's say, my kindergarten to 5th grade and do a mass prep. I cover, myself and the assistant principal, we will cover the whole classes downstairs in the gym to give an extra prep for those teachers there. Sometimes you don't think about it, but it goes a long way just giving that little bit. Being in a middle school, it's different. So they only teach for 25 teaching periods. So if I have a substitute that comes in to cover one of the middle school, any of the 4 extra periods I provide to those teachers that are given the extra time. At the end of the year, when we get any donations, any funding, the first few extra pennies, because that's what I call it, goes to those teachers and those commitment. So the word has spread around, oh, you get this and you get that. So I'm giving back some of what we get. And one of the things we do is anyone that helps the school get a grant or anything, they are included in the grant. What does that mean? If we get $1,000, the first $250 will go to that teacher for her classroom. So that goes a long way. With the bank, I write the letter. I do the first initiative, whether it's going to the bank, whether it's calling, but I do definitely refer a letter, and then what I do is I do the first meeting. Doesn't matter what, I'm doing that first conversation, and I'm the one leading and telling them. Then I have a team of teachers. I don't have extra support from the superintendent. These are just our parents, actually. There's a committee. I have a parent, I have a teacher, a paraprofessional, and a guidance counselor. That's part of, one of our CBOs that's there from 10 in the morning to 6 o'clock, it's part of this partnership. So it's first me doing that first visit, and from there the team goes. If I feel that within 3 months I haven't gotten a phone call, I'll make a walk, make it my time, my business to walk to the bank and say, hey, and then you know what I do? It works. Bring 5 or 6 students and a parent. And we walk right in, and we're like, we're here, and then, as soon as the little kids start, and they're like, Ms. Ramos, they're not gonna see us, they don't want us. I said, they'll wait. So that definitely has supported us and has worked for us. I don't know if it's going to work, but it has worked for 10 years. I hope it continues to work.
I can imagine that's very persuasive.
So definitely I do the first communication. And let me tell you, is it time consuming? Yes, but it goes a long way. Something I said this morning, and I'm going to share, in 22 years that I've been with the Department of Education in New York City, this is the first time I've left my school for more than a day. I have not ever been out from work, just half a day for my children's graduation. So this was important for me to come and share of how important it is to have a community and it's important it is for us to sustain those partners. Doesn't matter how little we think it is, but starting those partnerships, and like I said, it's a sacrifice at the beginning, but once you have it, it's definitely important and it continues to trend. A friend speaks to another friend and it comes back to the school and everything is given to the school.
Well, we're really grateful for you being here, so thank you for taking that risk of leaving the school in, I suppose, the very capable hands of your colleagues
I don't know.
for this week. So coming back to the question about philanthropy from Alison, I think we were speaking earlier about there's much more of a culture of philanthropy in the US that can support these kind of initiatives. But I wonder, Dave and Damien, from a UK perspective, where we do see that unequal distribution of philanthropy, what do you think we can do to see that more fairly distributed?
Okay. I think, if you look at other jurisdictions, there are certainly more players in the ecosystem than there are in the UK. And one of the mitigations, I think, is to engage with the whole system, not just the institution. That's not to negate the excellent tactics of approaching bank managers with young children in excising any amount of money out of them. I applaud that. And also just to applaud one of the key elements, I think, of systems leadership and great leadership is presence. And the fact that you're here for one day, more than one day out of your school, I think indicates that most of that leadership capability and capacity is focused in on the core job. I can't compete, but it's a big day out for me to come down to London because particularly bringing the cultural influence from the north. But jesting aside, one of the things I think is if you conceive the problem as a complex adaptive system, then you look at it through a different lens in terms of who it is you want to invite into the system. It's not just one-off point interventions. And whilst we were having the conversation before, I'd love to invite any large charities to bring their passion, their purpose and their purse to come and work in Doncaster. But actually what that tends to do, and government grant initiative ITIS, of course, is good at doing this, is it grows a dependency and a problem with that other issue that we were mentioning earlier, which is sustainability, because you raise expectations, you build commitment, and then you've got a partial vacuum because what you haven't thought about is the continuity and the sustainability. And it's for that reason that the concept of sustainability needs to be at the heart of all that we do. And that is why I'm fundamentally committed to an asset-based community development approach, because what that's doing is about releasing the capacity and the capability and the assets, yes, investing in the community, but utilising those assets as part of the learning experience. And we're committed to borrow a great idea from Hull in their City of Culture, which is they develop their own curriculum. And part of what that's to do is to actually maximise the learning opportunities, coming back to that identity with the place, that's in the place, because everyone needs to have an essential knowledge, skills and understanding about the place they come from so that they can achieve educational outcomes. And if you were keen-eyed, you'd notice there was a logo on one of my slides that I never referenced, which was 100 things to do before you're 11 in Doncaster, which we launched a couple of weeks ago off the back of our Easter egg hunt. That has gone viral, not because of us, but because of a parent, online parent organisation called Mumbler in Doncaster that gives information advice to parents. So it's about building that local education ecosystem and seeing that you have to invest in it. Another mitigation for me is the middle tier organisations. They're deliberately there to build capacity and sustain the system and provide equity in terms of where they invest resources that we or they have brought into those parts of the borough that have less. And the final point that I'd sort of reference to this also is that actually, when we're looking at a net deficit in public sector, and it's now biting in universal services like schools as well, then we do need to be more entrepreneurial and enterprising as a place. And one of the things that we're looking at, again, it's not our idea, we're nicking it from, I think, Wigan. That's a great thing about local authorities. We do cycle our ideas, which is a social investment fund, which is a cross-sectoral fund, which then enables us to scale up bids at appropriate levels.
I'm aware that there are a lot of people dying to ask questions, so we're going to go round for another bout of questions if we can. So I've noticed a few hands shoot up. There's one just on the front row at the end here, and then can we take one from the gentleman in the middle at the end of that aisle? And then I did briefly see a hand at this side, but I'm not sure where. Just here on the aisle as well, please. Thank you.
Good evening, colleagues. Maggie Atkinson, used to be Director of Children's Services, used to be Children's Commissioner, and I now chair Wigan's Education Partnership, Damien. And Wigan saw the cuts coming, and the reason it did what it did, and this is really relevant to everything that's been said tonight, was that it recognised that it couldn't carry on doing what it had always done, because it was never going to get what it had always got, because there wasn't any money. So it delivers all its public services in 7 service delivery footprints. Police, health, GPs, schools are part of the mix. There is an inflow and outflow of hospital consultants who come out from their clinics and come and see asthma sufferers in special schools and see more children in a day than they would in a month if they stayed in the clinic, and so on, and so on. And they've saved millions of pounds. And do you know what? The academies come to the table. The elephant isn't in the room because they are part of a shared endeavour. They've all chosen 3 key issues for Wigan: white working class boys' achievement, disadvantage, and a curriculum that lasts through the life of the learner rather than being driven by nonsense.
Thank you for sharing. I don't think I caught a question, so we're going to go to the gentleman at the end of the middle.
Thank you. David Hudson, RSA Fellow. Independent schools are charities, of course, themselves. I wondered if the panel had any views on what they could be doing to improve education within their broader communities.
Great, thank you. And then there was one final question just here. Thanks.
Exactly the same question as the last question.
Okay, wonderful. Well, then we'll definitely do that one. So does anyone have any thoughts about what independent schools could be doing to support this kind of working?
Well, of course, they're a broad church. And I'll stay clear of whether or not independent schools should be charitable organisations, but the ones that we benefit from, so for instance I mentioned Big Picture Learning, it's an independent school that delivers that, that's independently registered, and you know, if my cabinet member were here, and Maggie's comment about academies I think is really important, is she would say I'm not bothered what the name is over the door, they're all our children. And I think, you know, there's a policy obsession in this country about focusing on institutions rather than the process. Learning is a fairly intuitive process. We just felt that we needed to categorise it and bound it within schools because it was a more industrialised method of actually managing the transfer of knowledge and skills. I think what's really exciting about places like XP is that we're bleeding the edge of schools. And actually innovation, and we know this from the charter school movement in the States, comes from the edge. Mainstream education in this country will never meet the international challenges that are out there that other jurisdictions are competing more effectively than us at, because actually we still have a fairly antiquated view of what that is. So actually the innovation comes from the edge. So if those are independent schools and want to be a player in the system, and I do think there's an equity issue there as well, depending upon what their base is, and there's some good examples of independent schools like Wellington, then bring them on. And I think, you know, part of the benefit of a more diverse education system is that you do surface that innovation. The downside is, just like mortgages and the rate, they can also create failures, and we've had some of that as a result of the free school policy. But on that point, I'll finish.
I do think it's interesting that question about the role of academies and free schools has arisen a couple of times because when we were doing the research for this report, we actually found that quite a few of the schools we were identifying that were doing really interesting things were free schools and academies. And part of the reason we think that was that they were able to start from a blank page, and they were able to think from the very outset about the partners that they'd like to build their school with, and the way that they'd like to work with community from the outset. And we have a representative here tonight from the University of Birmingham School, who's one of the featured schools, and they started from the outset working with the university to develop a model for schooling that focused around character education. And I think if they hadn't started from the outset with that partnership, things could have been quite difficult, and it could have been, it could have been challenging to add partnerships later down the line. And so I think there's obviously a strength, as you say, when you get that opportunity to innovate. And maybe you've experienced something similar from Reach Academy, starting up as a really small school, which was something that you spoke about.
Yeah, I think Ed would acknowledge that he's been able and they've been able to define the direction they've wanted to because they've started from scratch and been able to go straight into the community and build those links in from that start. And they are then able to be entrepreneurial in the relationships they have with universities, other secondary schools, primary schools, and the local community. And it's added to the diversity that they're able to engage with, and also it benefits their students directly, and is beginning to benefit the wider community too.
but they've got to start from the outset being outward looking,
100%.
of course, which is
Can I
sometimes
just add to
hard.
that? I mean, I do think you've identified a real challenge for mainstream schools that have been established and are of scale, particularly secondaries. It's very hard in a high accountability stakes environment to take the risk, and particularly when you've got Ofsted tripping along and you've got league tables. And whilst ministers will say you've got the power to innovate already, actually what you don't have is the right conditions, and you don't have the right capabilities, and you don't have the insulation of time to risk what you're delivering. And I think that's a real advantage of starting from scratch. So the big issue, I think, is how do you diffuse and migrate those sorts of startups into established organisations, which is where most of the children and young people, particularly in my borough, are currently educated. And I think that's one of the challenges. So there's something about the environment and the context that allows for more of that scaling and spreading.
So I think we've got time for possibly one or two final questions, and then we're going to have to close, so I don't want to keep you here all night. There was a hand straight away at the back, so we're going to go there first, and then there's a lady third row back on the end, please.
Is this on? Yeah, hi, my name's Nick from Semble. It's a platform of community projects, and we run a campaign called Outdoor Classroom Day, which is a global movement to promote outdoor learning and play and encourage teachers to recognise the importance of that and support them with it. My question relates to active citizenship, which is a theme in the report, and I'd love to hear a bit more from the panel about some great examples that you know. Just to share one that I heard recently, obviously the most striking example, if you'll pardon the pun, is of recent activity amongst students is the climate action strikes. And in London in July, or perhaps June actually, there is going to be another movement towards that. I'm not sure on the details, but building particularly around their role in addressing the democratic system that we have. So encouraging kids to write about the importance of the issue to them, to their local MPs, and then hand-delivering the letters to their local MP surgery, which I think is quite an innovative way of using the Climate Action Strike Day. I'd love to hear some examples from the panel of good active or promotion of active citizenships amongst our youngest people.
Thank you, that's great. And we were really excited to be able to hear the young people out campaigning a few weeks ago from our offices up here, and went down to join them for a bit. Second question, sorry.
Hi, I'm Julia Cabanas. I'm an architecture student at the University of Cambridge, and I'm actually researching public schools in Harlem in New York. And I'm particularly looking at segregation and kids from disadvantaged backgrounds and how to sort of design schools in a way that works with that sort of community. And my question is for Suany Ramos. And I was wondering if there is sort of funding or focus towards what these schools look like, because I know that in New York there's a particular issue with, over like highly security buildings, lots of metal detectors. How do you make your schools feel dignified to your students?
Great. We're going to have to provide very brief responses to your questions, but it'd be great if you could come in a little bit and comment on the question about active citizenship. I know, Dave, that was a big part of your previous work.
Yeah, for sure. I think active citizenship and students being able to take forward the things they're passionate about is one of the best ways for them to develop those parts that aren't always covered in the curriculum, and they're able to look at their passions and express themselves, whether it is being on a march or writing letters to their MP. I think if you want to look at something that's happening very well in the UK is either looking at the things that I Will are doing, or if you look at an organisation called We, which is a Canadian charity, they have a yearly event called We Day where they bring 12,000 young people to London to celebrate all the different types of social action that they've been doing over the course of a year. And it just provides that experience for children. The kids from Reach went this year and they loved it, that they're just able to be taken out of their environment and actually have a room for the people who are celebrating the things that they've done that they're passionate about. So I'd say there are two things that you should really check out.
Can I just add, only because I want to profile XP again. So I've got responsibility for adult day services, and we commission a number of providers, including Age UK. And as part of one of their learning expeditions, XP, we're doing some intergenerational work in a day centre, and it involved all of the cohort being trained and active as dementia buddies. A whole I don't think anybody I've seen nationally has done that. And in terms of building upon the resources and also developing that dignity between generations, it's a really, really powerful learning experience.
Amazing, thank you. And happy to pick up afterwards as well about some of the things we've looked at in this report and previous reports for the RSA on social action. Suany, we're very nearly out of time, but could you give a 30-second response perhaps to the question about the way that schools are designed to integrate with their communities?
Well, I think, like I said, having 50% of student in temporary housing, we are cohort by districts, where we have in District 1, I'm part of District 1, about 20, there's 32 schools in total, and I am the second highest in the city with the demographics that I have. So when we talk about equity, it's definitely not there. And the expectations is that these group of students are in the school because they're not going anywhere. So I pre-K to 8, we don't have metal detectors. I think it has to do with the culture of the school, the culture that we as a team, as a family have inherited and have created a 188. Do we have incidents? Yes. Major incidents, we don't, because I think it's a sense of everyone that's in that building has a connection with 1 or 2 students. So if it is a difficult situation with someone, and remember, we are at what we call morning entry, so it's making sure that we are checking in before you enter. So every single child that walks through that door, I'm greeting them in the morning, and if they know, for example, you come in with an attitude, you're not coming in my building, so you're standing outside until you and I or someone could come and have that conversation to prevent from it. By this year now, being there 7 years, they already know the culture, so definitely, yes, everybody's asking for metal detectors, especially for the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, but at this point at our building, with the culture we have created, we don't think it's definitely needed, but again, it has to do with, do we think we have equity? No, that's a fight I have all the time with my district, and I said it before, being a school in good standing with that demographics, they were not expecting for us to do that. We don't have the funding, but we go out there and continue to get it, and we show them. One more second, most of the schools across the street from us, we have what we call BARD, Early College, which is a high school that you graduate with your high school degree and an associate. So most of our students, we have gotten students into BARDs to Brooklyn Tech, Stuyvesant, and then we have students that have graduated from Yale, from BARD, from Columbia University that come back and say, because of here, we made it. So can it be done? Yes, and is it difficult? Or we cannot stay and stop and say, they're not giving it to us. We, as leaders and as educators, we should go out there and continue to fight for those families that we have in our building. Because if we continue to just leave it, it's going to fail. We don't have to fail. Thank you.
Suany, I don't think we could have ended on a more poignant note, so thank you for closing that up beautifully. No, that's great. I'm afraid we are officially out of time, but if people do have questions that they didn't get the chance to ask our panelists just now, we are going to be downstairs in Rothmel's Coffee House for a drink afterwards, so please do come and join us and speak more. I'd like to say a huge thank you to all of you for being here. An extra special thank you to the schools that allowed us to visit for this report, especially Suany, who's then abandoned her school to come and be with us this evening, and to ECIS for supporting us to do this work. And please can you join me in giving one last thank you to our panel.